Everybody, a little bit of a different start this evening. We started the meeting actually at 6:15 out here. We did a roll call vote to go into executive session to discuss collective bargaining because discussion of the issue in open session would have been detrimental to the town. So we've already called the meeting to order, and we are back at about 7:09. So I will move at this point to the approval of the minutes. I know there have been some corrections.
Yes, so I would move to approve the minutes subject to the following correction that I wanted included to reflect that we asked the town clerk to look into whether added security should be considered in connection with the balloting process.
So I'd accept a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'm going to abstain
Oh,
from
you
this
weren't here.
since I was not present.
So I'll second it then.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You abstaining?
Abstain.
Okay. Okay. Public comment on items not on the agenda this evening. Seeing and hearing none, we will move to, are we going to do the?
We got to
okay.
do the ratifying.
Someone raised their hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Absolutely, Mr. Chambers. Please come to the microphone.
My name is Al Chambers. I live at 86 Central Street, Lincoln School Apartments for the elderly. Thank you all very much. Have a beautiful apartment. I wanted to express my concerns about the budget process to the selectmen. It seemed, I've been here a long time, and it seems like every single year we start off the same way with telling everybody to hold the line. Don't spend more money. The net result is we've had a loss of town services, not only services, but important features of the town, parklands, things like that. So I want to encourage you to think differently about this year's process and to ask the people what they need to run the department successfully and with appropriate amount of staff. A number of concerns that I have are things like we've let the town go to ruin in some areas. The town forest, Washington's town forest, has never, ever been properly forested. It is a fire hazard. It's a total danger. It's the home to predators. As some of you may remember, the woman carrying her dogs chased around by a bunch of coyotes. It needs to be thinned out dramatically. The fire ponds need to be dug out. They exist, by the way, but they filled in with crap. The fire trails through there need to be leveled and reopened because we can't get a truck in there. Also, the other parks I'm concerned about is we have Tranquility Grove, a historic, gorgeous, and I love the name, a historic, gorgeous park. We also have a 7-acre island down in the Cove, which was a town park for years, used mostly by the Knights of Columbus for weddings and picnics and receptions. Most of you don't know it's there, but it's really there. 7 acres, looks right down the Cove and out over World's End. We have things we've voted that we haven't finished, and we've just left them undone. One of them is, remember we voted for a gazebo from the old park downtown to be placed on one of the islands. It sits somewhere in a garage. It was voted 2 years ago. It would be a gorgeous addition to the harbor. It'll probably be a source of vandalism, but it's a gorgeous addition. We've let the skating club go to ruin.
You know, Mr. Chambers, I get that theme.
The time limit?
Yeah, I get the
Okay,
theme.
well,
We've
what
got
I
a
wanted to
very
say
busy
is,
meeting this evening.
Please stop researching. Please stop gathering data. There's a kamikaze party that returned from 8 missions in World War II, and everybody wondered what was wrong, and the problem was he didn't execute. I'm actually asking you to increase the budgets and execute what the town voters ask you for.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any further public comment this evening? Okay, we have a couple of votes to take tonight, so we're gonna move to that portion of the agenda. And we have at the table with us, Mr. Khan and Mr. Pace from the Personnel Board, who I'm gonna ask to talk to us a little bit about the Police Superiors Officers Union collective bargaining.
Happy to do that. Good evening, Selectmen. Good evening, people here watching from home.
Hang on one second, I'm sorry, ma'am?
Madam Chairman, your speaker is on.
Oh, okay,
So there really isn't a speaker per se. These are for the TV.
okay.
This is for the TV audience, but we can all speak up, I think.
Yep,
Okay.
happy to do that. Thank you. Sorry, Russell.
So I'm just, for everybody's edification, I'm Russell Kahn. I live on Studley Road. David Pace is with me. David is the chairman of the Hingham Personnel Board. I'm a member. David lives on Bucket Hill Road. And we're here to recommend to the board the execution of a memorandum of understanding with the Hingham Police Superiors Union. A little bit of background. Most Hingham contracts, collective bargaining agreements with the unions run for 3 years. We have a situation with the town where we have the firefighters contract and the police patrolman contract on a 3-year cycle that comes up for renewal in 2020. The police superiors are not on the same schedule, or have not historically been on the same schedule. They come up in 2019, June 2019. We, on behalf of the town, as a personnel board, have been exploring options regarding civil service that made it advantageous, really, to want to talk to all 3 unions at the same time next year, 2020. So I was asked by the police and fire department to explore, David and I were asked to explore a 1-year contract with the police superiors. We had several sessions, first with the police union's attorney, Alan Shapiro, a very experienced union lawyer, and then we had 2 formal sessions with the Police Superiors Union. I note that Lieutenant Kavanaugh, who's the president of the union and was the lead in the negotiating team, is here tonight. And Chief Olson, part of the bargaining team for the town, is here. And Mr. Mayo, the town administrator, formed the 4th person on the town's team. Both sides wanted a very quick agreement because it was a 1-year agreement, and we would get into more detail perhaps in the 3-year agreement coming next year. It became quite evident during our discussions and our research that the union was due a equity adjustment in terms of what is paid to the sergeants and lieutenants in that union. We researched that against the historical comps, which are the 20 sister towns to Hingham that are deemed similar for collective bargaining purposes, for many different purposes. They're the towns that are contiguous to Hingham, such as Norwell, Weymouth, Cohasset, Hull. But there are also towns that are of like size and dynamic, Wellesley, Lexington, being Winchester, being several of them, Marblehead. And so these 20 towns, we look at these 20 towns very carefully, and we try to stay just above the midpoint of those 20 towns, comfortable that if we do that, then we will have treated our police and firefighters fairly, and we do that with the other unions, frankly, that we negotiate with. So the union obviously was interested in this equity adjustment, and we were able to conclude a very, I think, quick resolution with them where we agreed to recommend to the board an equity adjustment that put the unions just above the midpoint. So where the Hingham sergeants were down on the list of 20, more in the 16 slot, with the raise, the equity adjustment that we've recommended will put them just above Norwell and Wellesley on the chart, with a basic rate for a basic sergeant in his 3rd year or higher of $38.17 an hour, which is 2 cents higher than the Norwell and Wellesley. But it puts the Hingham sergeants above the midway point. With the lieutenants, they weren't as far down the chart. They were closer to the middle, but they as well would do an equity adjustment that would take them from $43.57 to $45.53. So we've recommended that equity adjustment. The union has agreed to it. The other thing that, at least in my 8 years on the Personnel Board, in every contract I've worked on, there has been a 2% general wage increase in the contract that's built in after the equity adjustment, and that is in the Memorandum of Understanding as an adjustment here. And that's 90% of this Memorandum of Understanding. There were several other things that were intended to make the police superior's contract in line with the police patrolman's contract, in terms of very modest adjustments in the shift differential to make it the same as it is for the patrolman. The performance evaluation program was made the same for the superiors as it is for the patrolman, and there was a medical stipend that was baked into the contract that had been being paid because it had been agreed before, but hadn't found its way into the contract in the last draft. So relatively minor adjustments, with the one exception of the equity adjustment, which we felt was justified by a close comparison of what the other 20 comparable cities and towns are doing. David?
I think you've covered it very well.
So we do recommend it. Mr. Pace and I have signed for the Personnel Board. The union and Lieutenant Kavanaugh and his bargaining group have all signed, and they submitted it for ratification, and the union has ratified the Memorandum of Understanding. So right now it needs the approval of the Board of Selectmen and their signature on the agreement, and then that would be converted into a revised collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you. Lieutenant Kavanaugh, I don't know if you'd like to say a few words before we move on with the discussion from the union standpoint, and if you would, if I can invite you to the microphone. Sure. Thank you. Thanks for coming up.
I'd just like to thank the Personnel Board and Chief and Tom for making this a quick process for us. We thought it was very fair, and hopefully next year we could make it as quick. I'm holding hope that that's the case, but we would just like to say thank you to everybody. We're quite happy with the contract.
Great, great.
Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you coming to the table in good faith. And, I think we've said it before, the Personnel Board and Tom and Michelle, as well as the department heads, in this case the Chief of Police, work very hard, I think, to balance the goal of treating our employees fairly and with respect, and also being mindful of the financial implication for the town and the taxpayers. And, I think we want to take care of our workforce, and we want to properly pay our workforce, and I think my understanding from discussions with the Personnel Board is that's where we came to here. You heard Mr. Khan talk about the 20-town comparison and being just above the midpoint, and that's why there was an equity adjustment in this case for the Police Superiors Union, as is our practice. I think it was very well done, and I turn to my colleague Joe Fisher to see if he has any further questions or public comment on this.
No, I've reviewed the Memorandum of Agreement. It reflects exactly what's been stated, and then I see it does provide for the 2% general wage increase. And since this is only a one-year contract, there's only 2% increase here.
Correct.
Great.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mary?
I just echo my thanks and, reiterate that, the integrity of this process, and I think one of the reasons why it leads to a lot of collaboration, which we're seeing here and we're about to see with the DPW contract, is that the 20-town comparison is the starting point of the conversation. So, nobody goes in and says, okay, I'm here and I want to go here, or I'm here and I want to go there. We all, both from the town and from the union, we sort of put that aside and we say, what's going on in the marketplace? Let's let the marketplace be the barometer, and this is where the town needs to be. And I think that practice has served the town very well, and I think that it has led to the cooperative and very effective negotiations we've had. So thank you.
I agree. And, one last kind of accolade here, and that's for Tom and Michelle. I thought the process was well organized, and the materials that were provided to us were very helpful in being able to analyze the great work of the Personnel Board in this case. So, Any comments or questions from the public with respect to the Police Superior Union contract? Okay.
I just mentioned that Lisa Campbell was also very
Yes.
involved
Oh, great.
in terms of this, and want to make sure that we acknowledge her contributions as well.
Thank you for saying that. I would entertain a motion.
I move that the Board of Selectmen sign the Memorandum of Agreement with the Police Superior Officers Union, MCOP Local 405, effective July 1st, 2019 through June 30, 2020.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. And next up is the Department of Public Works Supervisors Unit. Jack Manning from the Personnel Board.
May I ask if Andy Walsh is my...
Please, Andy. I appreciate that. Thank you. Welcome, gentlemen. Jack, if maybe you could begin and just, if you could just take us through a little bit about the negotiation this time around?
Sure. So this is, for those of you who have not followed town affairs for too terribly long, this is a relatively new bargaining unit for the town. This is really the second time we've had negotiations with the DPW supervisors. Our first negotiation with this new bargaining unit was 3 years ago, and we had a 3-year agreement that we signed off on. Tough negotiations at the time, but fair. And we went into this process. Andy is part of the Teamsters and the agent for the unit. Andy and I worked tirelessly, quite frankly, over the series of the last 4 or 5 months to try to see if we couldn't hammer out really 2 things. One, a 1-year contract to get us into 2020, and then a 3-year contract that would take us through 3 years, that's 2023. So my math is terrible. I rely on
So far, so good.
So far, I haven't messed up too terribly. But it was important for us. We were trying to get a lot of the contracts to coincide at the same time. And in order to get there, we had to do a 1-year contract, and Andy was kind enough to hear us out on that and agree to certainly negotiating with that in mind. And then we really, Andy and I spent a lot of time talking about this before we sat down at the table. Do we really want to meet again next year? Why can't we just go forward and try to see if we can't get agreement?
Nice as you guys both are, probably.
Yeah, we're thinkers.
Yeah.
So, a lot of time in preparation for this. We sat down. Andy brought forth a number of proposals that the DPW supervisors wanted to ask of the town, probably 10, 11, 12, something along those lines. We, in turn, had a number of proposals or asks of the DPW Supervisors Unit. Hadn't had that in the previous negotiation, so I think that was kind of a learning process for the people that were sitting across from me and then part of Andy's unit. It's an interesting dynamic because when you're sitting across from Andy and the team, you're basically meeting the entire bargaining unit because there's only 5 people in this bargaining unit. So it's kind of a fascinating kind of a situation where you're literally sitting across from everybody, and if you can get agreement there, you know you're in pretty good shape for getting a proposal that's gonna fly and pass once a vote is taken. So we had a lot of negotiations. We agreed to a number of things that we thought were important to Andy and the DPW supervisors. We had a number of issues that were important to us, had to do with management control over comp time, vacation time, and really those 2 areas really impacted the DPW superintendent's ability to be able to schedule time without having to incur overtime and things of that nature. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. We got the other side to understand that this was an important issue for us, and we finally got approval on the questions and asks that we had as well. So all in all, I think we came up with a very, very fair contract. Went through a series of conversations, votes, and more conversations. But I think we came up with a contract. Again, it'll be a 1-year contract that'll take us through 2020, and then a 3-year contract that'll take us through 2023. So, and what we also tried to do, of course, was to try to keep in mind that we're dealing with limited resources. The town doesn't have a wallet that is completely open. We had to bargain very strategically for a contract that gave a 2% increase for the 1 year and then a 2, 2, and 2 for the following 3-year contract, and we got agreement on that. And then with the other costs that kind of roll in after you get finished negotiating salary, we were able to keep those costs down to a very, very reasonable ask as well, and perhaps a percentage point more than the 2% on the salary increase. But I think all in all, it was a very, very fair contract. Spent a lot of time making sure that these individuals knew that they were very valued assets for the town. If you're familiar at all with the supervisors in town, some of these gentlemen have 25 years of experience. Some have 40 years of experience working for the town. These are gentlemen that have devoted most of their adult life, in some cases, to working for the town. That's no small thing, and we certainly wanted to make sure that we appreciated their work on behalf of the town. We let them know that. So I think, all in all, we came out with what we felt was a fair contract. Andy did a terrific job bargaining for his side. I think we did an equal a display for our side, and we came up to something that we thought was fair and reasonable, and we got agreement on it. Andy got the vote from the DPW supervisors, and we're coming to you tonight in the hopes that we can get your agreement on an MOA, one for a 1-year contract and the other for the 3-year contract.
Great. Thank you, Jack. Andy?
This is my 3rd contract I've negotiated with the town. First, I'd like to thank the Personnel Board. Although some of the faces have changed, the goals have remained the same, a fair and equitable deal on both sides. And I believe we achieved that with this. I'd like to thank Jack and Michelle and Randy and everyone who sat in on this, and Marie. I think we achieved the deal, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
If I could just say one thing, Ken.
Yeah.
So it was a collaborative effort, please know that. So Marie's not here tonight. She moved out of town. I don't think it had anything to do with the contract. At least I'm hoping that it didn't. But Marie was invaluable to me. We worked as a team. We've worked as a team on a number of different contracts that we've negotiated over the years. It'll be a tremendous loss to the Personnel Board to have her no longer be part of the Personnel Board team. Michelle, Tom, unbelievable help. Every time I had a question, I picked up the phone. Michelle was on the other end of the phone answering my question. We needed analytics. We got those. Tom was incredibly helpful to us getting an understanding of where we needed to be. Lisa Campbell, who's our new director of HR, again, another individual that we reached out to constantly, was always there on the other end of the phone answering questions that we had. It was truly a collaborative team effort, and I wouldn't be here sitting here tonight without the help of everyone.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Questions from my colleagues?
First, a comment that we do appreciate the work that's gone into this, and the DPW supervisors are valued, and we're glad that the contract reflects that. I'm also incredibly impressed. This is the 3-year contract. It's a single page, just having 2% increases for each year. So a lot of work went into making sure that the terms were correct, that they fairly treated the employees and the town, and I just commend you for the work. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary?
I would just add that, again, while this is a different bargaining unit, it's the very same process that the town goes through. And so, again, what's, I think, important to us from the town's perspective is that we negotiate in a consistent fashion with all of our bargaining units. So, some of the aspects of the contract may change. One union may value one benefit a little bit more than another, but the underlying principles and the process are the same. And again, I think that's really important because in this environment, I think understanding that we're sort of dealing with everybody in a fair and equitable way is helpful. I'd also just make this point to the public. You keep hearing this 2%, and this contract actually, it's 2% in each of the next 4 years. So it's 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%. One of the realities and one of the challenges that we have in Massachusetts is that under Proposition 2.5, our revenue can only grow by 2.5% a year. So if our contracts are growing by more than that 2.5%, that just makes it very difficult. And I think a very important part for the town as we're negotiating is, especially in this bargaining unit with such longevity, is that we want to make sure we have a contract that the town can honor so that we can continue to have these valuable members of our team still working for the town. We don't want to create a contract that we're going to have trouble affording. So again, my thanks, Jack, to you and Mr. Walsh. Job well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just echo those remarks. I think that in particular, the work of the Personnel Board and the work of Tom and Michelle in really supporting the collective bargaining negotiations speaks to the importance of that role within town government. That's one of the primary functions of town government, is to take care of its employees. And so, it's stuff that you don't see every day, but it's things that we have expert people, Lisa Campbell, Tom, Michelle, and the Personnel Board working on behalf of the town to execute on. So, we're all doing our job. We're all, trying to get work done. And I think some of this work is stuff that you don't see, but the result is that you have a workforce and you're entering into contracts having gone through the diligence necessary to establish that pay equity. So I appreciate that. And, I echo you, Jack. This may be a small bargaining unit, but the institutional knowledge of the folks in that room with you is critical to the care and maintenance of the infrastructure of the town. It's just essential. And so, I appreciate the fact that you're satisfied with the contract, and as Joe said, we do incredibly value the work of that particular bargaining unit. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the public on the DPW Supervisors contract? Okay, I would entertain 2 votes on this one.
Make a motion to sign the Memorandum of Agreement with the Teamsters Local 25 DPW Supervisors effective July 1, 2019 through June 30, 2020.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye. And I'll make a motion to sign the Memorandum of Agreement with the Teamsters Local 25 DPW Supervisors effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Thanks
so
so
very
much.
much. Appreciate it. Okay, and now we are back to the regular format of the agenda tonight, and we'd like to hear from the Audit Committee. We're going to review the town's annual financial statement for FY19. So I know Sue Nickerson, but if you could introduce yourselves to the public, we would appreciate it.
I'm Jim Petrowski. I was the manager on the town's CAFR audit for fiscal year 2019.
Rob Schickel, Chair of the Audit Committee, 14 Whitcomb Lane.
So, who'd like to take us through this?
I'll follow my predecessor here in keeping this brief and to the point. I'm here tonight representing the Audit Committee. There's 5 of us. Myself as the chair, Joshua Marine, who's the secretary, Doug Farrington, Lena Scapini, and John Deely. He's a recent ad. We're here to present the town's financial statements, federally required single audit and management letter per the charter of our committee. And we met on a number of occasions consistent with the charter of our committee over the past year. The following documents that I believe you should already have were assembled by our accountant from Clifton Larson Allen, Jim Petrowski, and Chris Rogers, who's not here. So first off is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, known as the CAFR. The second being the Town of Hingham GAO and Uniform Guidance Report for year-end June 30, 2019. Third, Town of Hingham Contributory Retirement System Pension Plan Schedules for the year-end, December 31st, 2019. And the fourth, the management letter discussing internal controls, ongoing status of previously reported items, and review of upcoming change. Some key findings to note. We didn't identify any material disagreements with management. The audited financial statements received an unmodified opinion, in which the best opinion that a government unit can receive. It indicates that the financial statements were prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and that they are fairly presented in all matter. The single audit report, however, was a modified opinion due to material noncompliance with allowable cost timesheet reporting. Of note, this is the second year of the finding. I think if necessary, Jim can speak to that. And although the management letter was issued, no material weaknesses were identified in internal control over financial reporting. So you should have all these before you.
Yep.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sue, do you want to make any comments at this point?
I just want to thank the audit committee, CLA. It's their second year for our audit. It went very smoothly this year. I was very, very excited. It went very smoothly and very quickly. Without the support of the Selectmen, the Town Administrator's Office, and every single department head in this town for being great financial management, we never would have gotten this done. And the fund balance proves everybody is very fiscal management. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Great, thank you, Sue. Joe, questions?
Thank you for your work. One of the comments that I noted is that the Government Accounting Standards Board has issued a statement requiring new financial reporting requirements that become effective for fiscal year 2021. And I'm wondering what's our progress in being able to achieve that?
You want to take that?
Sure. So the standard to be implemented in 2021 is GASB Statement number 87, which is lease accounting and financial reporting. It is just going to require some changes to the recognition in the town's lease liability, leased assets as well, with possible, depending on the leases that are in place at that time, there could be some additional reporting changes depending on what leases are outstanding in place. So there'll be some disclosure implications. Right now, the lease activity for the town, as you'll see, there's a capital lease that's reported in the financial statements and disclosed. I don't envision that the changes in that particular disclosure would be significant with the new implementation. However, it would depend on what leases are in place at the time that standard is implemented in 2021.
So, but the town is moving forward to make sure that we've got the data assembled so that.
Yeah, we'll be fully compliant with it.
Great.
Barry?
I think this letter that was in our folders was very helpful. I think I'd like to read that carefully, and perhaps if I had any questions, I can forward them to Tom or to Sue. And I would just note that the CAFR, I would just tell you that, not only is this affirmation of the town's strong financial position, but I will tell you that this is really a very valuable tool that so many people use during the year, whether it's a presentation about the town or looking at statistics, looking at trends. We use, this is really something that is used all the time. And in particular, early in 2020, the town is going to be financing the purchase of the water company. And, during that process, we have discussions with the rating agencies, and the CAFR is just going to make that process a whole lot easier. So I would say thank you. I had one question for the auditors that I don't necessarily want to get into tonight, but are there any standards or practices with respect to revolving funds that exist out there, whether it's in GASB or best practices that your firm recommends?
Specifically, off the top of my head, the one that stands out, the Massachusetts Division of Local Services actually has the Community Compact Grant website, which actually displays a variety of financial policies and procedures that may cover revolving funds. As far as authoritative guidance on the GASB side, there's none I can think about on that end, but I would recommend that Community Compact grant the policies and procedures. There's plenty of
The reason I'm asking, we've got budgets coming up, and we have the town has a number of revolving funds, and one of the things that I'm always looking at is how much money have we accumulated in the revolving fund, how much have we expended, and are we appropriately letting that money flow through the funds? And I didn't know if there were any kind of guidelines out there that are helpful. Some of our revolving funds are driven by statute, like the building department, but others, I think Council on Aging and some others are a little bit more discretionary. It's just something that, as we have in the budget process, it's helpful to have on hand. Thank you.
Any questions from the public on the audit, on the CAF or the audit committee letter?
I have two
Go ahead.
more, if you
Sure.
don't mind, just kind of punctuation. I didn't get to my opening remarks, I should have. This didn't happen by accident. Without Sue managing the entire process, we would be in a very different place. And with Jim and Chris from CLA, it's been a much different year than last year. Far better, improved, smoother, and more consistent with what we've come to expect. And to that end, for the record, the town has received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting by the Government Financial Officers Association for fiscal year 2018. So we're hoping this one
Congratulations.
receives the same.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Well, it's just Sue, I think you said it, it's just a ringing endorsement from kind of the ground up that we take we take great pride, I think, in carefully stewarding every single tax dollar. And I think your review of our financial practices, I think is affirmation to the public that we are doing just that. So I appreciate it. Okay.
I would just echo Rob and Sue's comments. It's been it was a much smoother year this year. I just want to express my appreciation to Sue, to Jean Montgomery as well, and her staff, as well as Rob and the rest of the committee. We really appreciate their involvement throughout this process. It made it very, very smooth this year. So I just wanted to express that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further from anybody? I think we need a vote on this. I would accept a motion to accept the financial statements and management letter as submitted.
Second. Oh, I make that motion.
Second.
There you go.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, thanks for being here. All right, now the highlight of the evening, we will move to budgets. Ah, Sue, that was like so efficient.
Perfect.
Yeah,
It's almost like it was
it's almost like we planned it, exactly.
I think we had a hand in that.
All right, town accountant budget, everybody.
Okay.
So Stu's budget starts out on page 22. What you're going to hear tonight is Sue is going to present, I believe it's 6 different budgets to you in succession. We have some data that we prepared in the PowerPoints. As we did last week, I'll ask Sue to kind of walk through those budgets, and as she's doing so, I'll be flipping through for the public to be able to see some of the data points and metrics that she meets every year while you guys are conversing about the budget. So Bob is on there, so Sue, take it away.
Take it away, Sue.
Okay, town accountant's budget, fiscal '21. Total salaries, department requests, which the town administrator is recommending, $275,572. Expenses, $11,355. And audit services, $71,500. I'm level funding my expenses. The salary has gone up by about $4,000 due to step increases to my staff. Just want to say that there's only a couple of different things that have changed this year. As you heard, we got the award for the CAFR for 2018. That happens to be our 23rd consecutive year of getting the award.
No pressure, though.
No pressure. Once we get 25, then I can retire. And basically, we're doing a lot of munis enhancements this year. We are now starting to go paperless on our direct deposits. We are emailing our direct deposits instead of printing them out, which saves on toner paper. It saves on the treasurer's office from stuffing them in envelopes and distributing them. Some of the reporting we do the W-2s, the 1099s, the tax recap, we certify free cash, we do Schedule A, we do our quarterlies for unemployment. If you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer any of them.
Joe?
Just one question on the auditing services, which from 2018 and 19, there's now a jump for this year. Why such a big increase?
They jumped because of the two requirements now for OPEB and pension, the two GASBs that they have to do, which added a significant amount in the CAFA for disclosures.
That's all I have.
Sue, I remember last year when you put this presentation together, like something like 2,000 checks cut a week. The amount of transactional activity in your office with a team of 4 is considerable. And I would just mention that on top of that, and I'm glad that the key initiatives are out there, in addition to all of these different transactions and everything, to be able to provide support to the advisory committee and the audit committee to help with the transition of benefits to, long-term capital planning. Just really appreciate all the great work, and most recently on some technical questions regarding the water company, your credibility with the Department of Revenue really helped the town as it worked through a kind of unusual issue, so thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Thanks. See if there's any questions, members of the public, on the town accountant's budget. Want to move on then to the...
Next one is the reserve fund. That is on page 21. And we're requesting $629,100. That is in conjunction with our financial policy. Our financial policy has us have a 0.75% of the operating budget set aside for our reserve fund, which is for unanticipated or unexpected expenses.
This is this consistent policy that's...
Yes. It is reviewed by the advisory every 3 years.
I have no questions.
Yeah, no, the reserve fund is necessary, and we're in compliance with our financial policy with this appropriation request.
Yep.
That's right.
Any questions from members of the public on the reserve fund? Go on. So next is the debt service.
And the debt service is on page 295.
I'm making this work there.
Now, you're all in the back of the book. Debt service for principal is $6,096,615. Interest is $1,832,769, and that is right off our 15-year debt schedule. And there is a fairly new budget. It is called unused non-excluded debt capacity, and for 2021 is $33,474. And what that is, we level funded non-excluded debt at 2017 level. And as our interest goes down, we are level funding it, so the balance will go into this account, and we're going to reserve it in fund balance. So when we go for a debt, we have a substantial amount. Right now, with our short-term financing, after 3 years, on the 3rd year, we are required to do a pay down, so our this amount is a lot less than we thought it would be.
But I think the other important thing is that if you look at that line in the forecast, by budgeting it flat, we're creating capacity in the operating budget so that if a warrant article comes in to be funded with non-excluded debt, what we're trying to do is to create some capacity to at least offset that. I would make 2 points. The first one, and it kind of harkens back to the financial presentation I did a few weeks ago, but there's close to $8 million of debt service in our operating budget, combination of principal and interest. So on a $108 million budget, there's about $8 million, so I don't know, about 7% of our budget is debt service. That's not free money. The other thing I would just mention, and Sue was helpful, as committees and boards look to submit warrant articles to have projects funded through debt, Sue was very helpful, and she prepared a schedule, and I forgot to print it out to bring it in Selectmen reports to show, but essentially Sue's created a table that shows for different levels of borrowing what the debt service might be. And it's just a helpful guidepost that I'm recommending that we give to boards and committees. So before they submit their warrant article for $3 million for whatever, there's a conversation of, okay, this is how much debt service it might be, just to kind of help people kind of connect the dots a little bit here. And again, reiterate the fact that, you know, when we borrow money, it's kind of not free. There's a cost to that, and I think we need to be conscious of that, particularly every year it seems that the operating budget is tight. So if we're taking on more debt within the operating budget, those dollars can't be used to fund other stuff. So I appreciate your help, and I think that'll be helpful for the boards and committees and the advisory committee as we get into warrant articles.
No problem.
And I would note, unlike every other budget item we've seen, this is down.
This is down.
The amount of the principal, debt service, and the interest are down year to year.
Yes.
It's reduced. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions from the audience on the debt service budget? Okay.
The next budget is group insurance on page 300. The request is $6,916,113. This is a placeholder. Right now, what I did is we are requesting 10% over this year's budget. When the GIC comes in with their new rates, we will look at this and see where we are, whether we can.
Is that February? When is?
It's usually mid to end of February.
Okay.
And then basically what I do usually is take the December bill and figure out how many people are on each plan. Since there are like 12 different plans, it is really hard to judge where they're gonna go.
Yep, okay.
And one point actually I would like to make on health insurance is we are trying to negotiate on life insurance, our basic plan. We have a $5,000 basic plan, and $5,000 just doesn't bury someone. So we're going to negotiate with Boston Mutual and try to increase that benefit for everyone. And it will be within this budget.
And so would that negotiation be effective for this
Yes.
coming fiscal year?
Yes.
Yeah, that's an opt-in too for the employees.
Okay,
So.
okay. And do you want to cover OPEB?
Since it's on the same page, sure. OPEB, $1,194,156. OPEB is other post-employment benefits. This is right off our schedule from the actuary. What we do is we took the 2014 actuary and added to $250,000 and coordinated with what we have been doing in the past few years.
Okay. Joe?
No questions on this?
So this is an increase of only about $40,000 from this past year?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And we did a full actuarial analysis, was it last year? I know we do it every couple years.
Yes, we did 2018.
Yeah. I would just mention, as we were talking about contracts and treating our employees, taking care of our employees. OPEB is really important. OPEB is basically the town is committed that when our employees will retire, they will continue to have, we will continue to share in their health care costs. And you have to save for that, because if we didn't save for it, it would become the biggest budget buster you ever want to see. Hingham, I just would note, was the first community in the Commonwealth to begin funding to OPEB, and we did it in 2008 when Karen was on the advisory committee, and that group made a lot of really tough choices. That was the worst time in the world to take $1 million out of the operating budget, but the advisory committee then knew that that was the right thing to do. We continue to honor that obligation, and I believe that as time goes on, this will continue to make us an employer of choice, because we will be able to follow through on this commitment. Unfortunately, I'm not sure everyone can say the same.
I agree. I don't have any questions on this. Questions from the public on the health insurance or OPEB budgets? Okay. Sue, workers' comp?
Workers' comp, page 303. Workers' comp is a self-insured trust. We are requesting and level funding it at $330,000. This covers any employee that is hurt on the job for their salary or their medical bills. Anybody have any questions on workers' comp?
Are we experience rated on this? Is our rate set on?
No, we are self-insured.
Oh, okay. Then I got no questions. Thank you.
Sue, do the 18 and 19 actuals, which were higher than that 330, are you comfortable with where this budget is based on the last few years?
I am now, because those 2 years, we did settle some claims, so now, hopefully.
Thank you.
We don't have
Back on
any more.
track?
Yes, hopefully.
Questions from the public on the workers' comp budget? I feel like Jim Taylor's just lying in wait, because he wants to get after these budgets, yeah, okay. No questions, okay. Sue?
Okay,
Unemployment.
unemployment, 304, requesting $30,000. This is a budget that is very cyclical. Some years we go over, some years we don't. We have got, in 19, we did go over a lot. I will tell you, 2020 is looking to be the same. But I feel $30,000 is comfortable for right now.
No questions on that.
Okay, good. Mary? Nope. Okay, thanks.
Retirement, page,
Yeah, public comment on unemployment. Sue?
retirement on page 3,
Bless you.
on 302. $5,090,917. This comes directly from our actuarially valuation report. This is money set aside for, to pay out the retirement, our portion.
Joe,
No,
question?
this is just driven from the actuarial tables. I've got no question.
We're about 2/3 funded?
About 69%, yes.
Oh, great, thank you.
Questions on contributory retirement? No takers, okay.
When you put it that way.
That's why mine goes so
Couldn't even get
fast.
that,
Nobody
yeah.
has any questions.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, that's right. You said it out loud.
Medicare.
Medicare, page 305, $1,070,850. This is a direct result of all salaries. It's 1.45% of salaries we pay.
Joe?
Nope, no questions.
Sue, what's the head count assumption on 21? Is it flat head count, or is it based on salary dollars?
Actually, right now, this is a 10% bump from FY 2020. We usually just put 10% in.
Okay, I know that sometimes in years past, as we've gone to, as we're getting close to finalizing the budget, head count additions
that can be.
It can be tricky to manage. Are we okay with where we are, or is there anything we can do along the way so that we don't get a surprise at the end of the process?
The only thing we can do basically is if, once we get the final budget, before we vote, is to tally up the salaries, because the education budget is always a difficult split. So when we find that number, then if we multiply it by 1.45%, we can see if it's around that.
Yeah, I just think in that last couple days, as we go to finalize the budget, there's typically, the salary lines of all the budgets are pretty firm by then. Let's just do a check, because that last $100,000 is always really tough to close, and if then we find out we need another 50 or 60,
Right. So can we put that on our
Yes.
little checklist?
And we've gone reserve fund transfers in the past few years for
Yeah.
Medicare.
Trying to avoid that, right?
Yep, that would be good. Questions from the public on Medicare? Tried to sound a little more inviting, still no questions. All right.
All right, we already did OPEB, so general insurance, it's on page 301. This is going to be a big hit, and I'm sorry. 2021, $759,633. Unfortunately, we had several huge claims at the end of FY19, which drove our rates up, so.
Who's our provider?
Our Richardson Insurance is our broker.
Okay. In Hull, right?
Yes, in Hull. And they do a wonderful job of sharpening their pencils and trying to get every dollar for us. Unfortunately, with the claims from the high school fire and the flood, they paid out more than what we paid in.
Okay.
So,
Have there been any changes in the terms of coverage associated with these changes in rates?
no.
Okay. Thank you.
I would just mention to my colleagues that one of the water transition items that we have is insuring a water company and a water system. And Sue has been helping us have those discussions with Richardson, but our intent is that, similar to kind of other shared costs, the enterprise fund would pay if, to the extent that this insurance numbers go up, we are carrying right now money in the enterprise budget that the town would get reimbursed. So any changes in insurance relative to the water company will become part of the rate base as they should.
So, well, we probably shouldn't get into this, but, so the water company itself won't carry independent insurance, or is that just short term? So there won't be a specific water company policy? It'll be carried under the town's policy?
That's the thought right now, because the town has this kind of umbrella policy that covers everything, so the water company would get added. But we're in the stages of talking with Richardson, so they've asked us for, what are the assets, et cetera, but it seems at this point that would be the preferred way to go.
Interesting, okay. I just say that, I think that, and if the school department were here, I think they'd echo this. In addition to the policy dollars, I think Richard's really been responsive to the town.
Yes, they have.
I think that they show up, they return phone calls. A lot of times you're calling right when you really need information, or you're in a situation where you need help, and I think that they've been very responsive in that
Wonderful.
regard, so.
They are.
Every time I pick up the call, Bruce Minovitz answers, and
Yeah,
he
he
gets
does.
right back to me
Yeah, it's
instantly.
amazing, yeah. Great local service, so.
right.
Questions from the public on general insurance? Okay,
I am all done.
wow, Sue, quite well done.
Thank you
for
very
being here.
much.
Thanks for all your work.
Sue.
Yes.
Next up is Jennifer Young from Elder Services, Council on Aging. Good evening, if you could just introduce yourselves for the folks at home.
Okay, I'm Jennifer Young. I'm the new Director of Elder Services for the Hingham Council on Aging and Senior Center.
I'm Dawn Sibber. I'm Chair of the Council on Aging.
Thanks for being here tonight. If you could just take us through your budget?
Okay. I just wanted to first say thank you to the board members that are present here with me tonight. Dawn, Gail Faring, David Alschuler, Linda Powers, and Deb Sullivan. So thank you for your support. So the Hingham Senior Center, we operate a 5,000 full-time senior center, including a bustling transportation service, volunteer opportunities, tax work-off positions, health clinics, support groups, and lifelong learning. The center is very unique for a municipal department, where by design, our patrons ideally would come at 8:30 in the morning when we open and stay until the doors close. They like to be with us, and that's really nice because we like to be with them as well. So we've expanded our programs, program hours on Tuesday evenings so that we can offer programs to working or otherwise obligated seniors. We have also revamped our new in regards to marketing and outreach. With benchmarks and metrics, back in July, we actually introduced a new information management system. So to this point, we've collected 4 months of data, which you can see. I just want to highlight that we have 12 volunteer drivers who over 1,000 rides to 48 people in the last 4 months. So that's just an impressive number. And we have held 83 individual programs over 1,400 times. So we're a very busy center. And with the introduction of this new data management system, you can see that the seniors have almost 5,500 times since the implementation of the center, the data management. I also just want to note quickly that we were reviewed on site by the National Institute for Senior Centers last week for our national accreditation, which is the third time going through the process. And I expect a notice of award. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for their work on that. For our key initiatives coming up in March, we're going to celebrate our 50th anniversary of the establishment of the Council on Aging. The board has formed a committee to help plan out several events to celebrate, and it's possibly a time to engage the community if we want to rebrand the center to an active living or healthy aging center. And that leads us into our strategic plan. The strategic plan is required, our 5-year plan, to maintain our National Institute accreditation, and we will also conduct our satisfaction survey this year. We want to explore expand programs and services to satellite locations. We have some space restrictions that we need to work with in more creative ways. We want to create a virtual library of videos so that our seniors and caregivers can access them from home. And increase community partnerships to help broaden the perspective on our programming. Our salaries will be $260,131 for 3 full-time personnel and 4 part-time personnel. The transportation program, you can see the salaries of $45,230. That is fully supported by an Executive Office of Elder Affairs state formula. We have 161 volunteers that provided over 8,000 hours in FY19, the equivalent of almost 5 full-time employees. So that's a savings to the town of $280,733 in terms of services that have been provided. Our expenses are $1,888, and the major items for that is $16,013 for the transportation program. That's repair and maintenance, gas, and the cost of tires. I just want to say that we did submit a request for an additional funding for a program coordinator. It wasn't supported by town administration. And that concludes the budget.
Great, thank you. Dawn, do you want to make some remarks?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment. Thank you for your support. We appreciate your coming at the end of October to the open house, which was really a wonderful event for seniors to get to meet and greet. So thank you for that. I would just like to let you know that the board, the Council on Aging Board, has voted unanimously to support Jennifer's position for a program coordinator. And we have been working with her to gather data from the other similar communities, such as you were speaking about earlier. I have some of that data here. We've been doing it for a while, but getting answers has taken us a bit. But we have 10 communities that some surround us, some not, but all of whom have program coordinators. And so I will this information. I just got a little bit more today, but it's really important to meet the diverse and growing needs of our senior population, which currently sits at 27.3 in 2018 of the Hingham population, that we have a coordinator to work on programs using creatively the limited space that we have. So I just want to let you know that that's something our board feels very strongly about and will continue to advocate for through this whole process.
Thanks, Don. Joe, questions?
Tom, did you want to fill us in on the coordinator?
My process?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did speak with Jennifer about this and Dawn. My process is I'm looking at the entirety of the town. That's the difference, is Jennifer and Dawn are rightfully so advocating for the senior center, and the Council on Aging's process is absolutely in the right place. They're doing what they should be doing. I'm looking at the entirety of the town budget when I make these decisions, recommend and what not to. And what I had suggested to, after reviewing all the different requests that were being made, what I had suggested to Jennifer was perhaps where this is her first year as the new director of the senior center, that it might make sense for us to attempt to get of what she feels is going to be needed long-term after a little bit more tenure under her feet here with the town. So that's why I didn't recommend it forward. It's not that I don't think that it's a valued or certainly an important position, but I just don't know that we need it right now. And I think Jennifer and I would be willing to work over the course of the next year. Jennifer worked with me over the course of the next year to determine how best to fill that, should it not be funded this year.
Yep.
Well, and I feel like the metrics that you're collecting only further strengthen the case, right?
Yeah. Right.
Mary? I'm sorry, do you have anything further?
Yes, because I think this is an important demographic that the town should be supporting. It is a growing demographic, and Tom, I would support continuing the analysis. And I wanted to thank the Council on Aging for the food that they provided to the Board of Selectmen when we showed up. It was very nice, and it was also great, really, to get a firsthand sense of how things are operating there. We recognize the space constraints that you're under, and I know the town is actively looking to address those as well.
Mary?
Thank you, and Jennifer, very nice job. First year doing a budget, so very nice job. Two questions about this request. The first one is, if it's not funded this year, what isn't going to happen in the senior center? What won't happen if this isn't funded?
It limits the types of programs that we can offer. It limits the ability to research innovative programs. It limits the number of programs, whether they're on-site or off-site. It limits the ability to offer programs off-site because we don't have the staffing level to support a program off-site. I've been doing a lot of work with some other community agencies to try to change that a little bit, but we still have to have oversight in programs that we're supporting.
Yep.
So those are some of the immediate limitations.
And I guess my second question is just in terms of this position, is it the type of thing where you would hire somebody full-time, or, this is a question I always ask when people are looking to fund positions, because sometimes in Hingham, it's easier to sort of gradually do things. Does starting this off as a part-time position and migrating to full-time, does that make sense for a position of this nature or not?
The need is all day.
Okay.
Every day. To be honest, we spend a lot of time, myself included, You know, with communicating around the programs, it takes about 10 hours of work to develop one single opportunity program, whereby if we're offering multiple programs, and I'd like to expand what we are offering, I feel like that's my responsibility to the seniors. It really should be full-time for consistency of communication and delivery of service.
Okay. And just my last question, I like the idea that you're looking at satellite locations. What are some of the locations that you're looking at?
Well, we've had communications with other town departments.
Okay.
Which would help to alleviate sort of the immediate oversight, but also looking at some assisted living facilities to co-sponsor some
Okay.
programs, some home care offices as well. I'm sort of looking at all the opportunities that exist in the area. I don't want to limit myself.
One of the things I might just, recommend is thinking about the South Shore Country Club. They have a couple meeting rooms that oftentimes I know are available during the day. You've got ample parking. I know the library meeting rooms are usually in very high demand, but I would encourage you to pursue those locations because it's increasing. And the last thing I would just say, we were all at the Volunteer Appreciation Luncheon. Every year, it's just so amazing to see well over 100 people who are being so generous with their time. And, I appreciate that you've quantified that. It says a lot about our community, the extent to which people are volunteering, and we so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Could I make just one comment about what wouldn't get done without this position? Jennifer spends a lot of time doing things that I think we didn't hire her for as a director, moving things around, setting up, spending many hours on planning a program when she could be working on doing other things to expand the senior center and the offerings. So not that we don't want her there and visible, but for her to be running in and out of programs and having to go buy things for programs, coming in, welcoming, ending it, making sure the furniture's set up, the AV equipment or whatever, is just, once in a while, it's great. Everybody has to pitch in, but every day, day in and day out, it also, one of the things that the reviewer said at the accreditation was that it's so important for folks like Jennifer to be out and to be able to meet others and to network with the Mass Councils on Aging. And so she needs to have somebody who's there running programs, because the other people also have jobs that they're doing, and everybody just can't be in and out of the rooms if they're doing something else. So it's a really important job that we actually used to have a person doing this until about 4 years ago. So I think it's really very obviously needed. And so as I said, I do have the information, and we'll get some more within the next couple of weeks, but.
Well, and as you and I talked about today, I think that sort of highest and best use kind of calculus is important, because we are hiring people to be department heads, And I appreciate the information, and we'll certainly review it. And as you and I talked about, this is the opening round of the budget process. The budget will go through a number of iterations, including, careful scrutiny by the advisory committee. So I think, the more data that we have, the better. But, like Tom, we're also in kind of that overarching position of having to evaluate the needs of multiple departments. And there, have been a number of personnel asks kind of in the pipeline that have been held back. And, we're kind of gradually getting to those. It doesn't diminish the importance of frankly, any one of those asks, but that's the challenge we have, and that's the challenge our advisory committee colleagues will have. And, I think it's important that we're all educated about the operation of the senior center. And I think that, and the three of us talked about this, I think it should be a regular occasion that the board goes down to meet with the Council on Aging and the participants at the senior center, because it's a different conversation than coming here, frankly.
Yeah.
So, and again, one of the highlights for I think all three of us is really the participation in the volunteer luncheon, because that's kind of the visual recognition of the number of people who make the senior center what it is on a daily basis. And, it speaks again to that demographic, the importance of volunteerism in the town. And we couldn't undertake what we undertake without that degree of support. So if you're out there, we appreciate that as well.
Well, thank you for the support. We appreciate it.
Questions from the public on the Elder Services budget? Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for being here.
Thank you.
Tom, do you want?
Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Human Resources next. Good night, Al. Welcome, Lisa.
Lisa Campbell.
Lisa Campbell, our HR Director. If you could take us through your budget.
Brand new HR director, 6 months?
January I started,
January.
but.
Wow, closer to a year, my God.
Yeah, I know,
Wow.
time flies, really does. So, as you said, I'm the new Human Resources Director. I help manage the functions of human resources for all town employees, with the exception of the school department employees. Examples of those functions would be maybe helping the personnel board administer their personnel bylaws, or helping in the selection process or the recruitment process when it comes to new hires, helping with the collective bargaining agreement process when necessary. Benefits coordination has just come under this department as well. And that does service the school department employees. That's the only function that we have that does actually service and extend over to the school department staff. Our major initiative right now is the wage and classification study. We have, the budget that we have, the majority of it is for salaries with a small amount asked for expenses, $3,350. So the total budget that we're asking for is $136,190. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Joe.
I have no questions. This is a pretty lean budget.
Lean and mean.
I'd just say, we are a people-intensive business, and the people that work for the town are, what makes this community so special. And so you play a very vital role in what you do. In particular, I know the wage and classification study has been a really heavy lift this year. That is going to continue to inform our collective bargaining. It's going to continue to inform organization structures and things that we do. And that is going to be that study is going to have a lot of utility for many years. So thank you.
I'd just like to say too that being new, everybody, Michelle and Tom, all of you guys, and all of the department heads have been so amazing in helping me to transition into this role for the town, and it's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, we're happy you're with us.
Thank you.
I wondered if you could maybe say just a couple of words about the wage and classification study, because I agree with Mary. I think it's an important set of metrics that we review from time to time and that form the basis of, a lot of our wage analysis. So maybe just take a couple of minutes and let people know what that's all about.
Yeah, sure. So what we're doing is we're reviewing, it's just under about 100 different types of positions, and we're going out to all of our communities, our comp towns, and collecting data on all of the salaries that are comparable to each person's position, or each position with the town, I should say. We've hired GovHR, which is a third-party company that is helping us in collecting all that data and to implement a system that's going to allow us to grade everything and compensate everybody appropriately. Right now, where we are is we're reviewing all of the data from GovHR that they've given to us. We're about 2/3 of the way done with that. We're trying to be very careful because this is a very important process, and it hasn't been done for a long time. So we're taking our time and making sure that we do it right. after that, we're going to be submitting it back to them, and they will take all of the data and put it into a wage band for us to review, and then Tom and Michelle and I will review all of that, and it has to go to the Personnel Board for their review as well.
Great, thank you. Questions from the public on human resources? No. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, appreciate it. Land use and development. Emily, welcome. Good evening. If you could take us through your budget?
Sure. I'm still getting used to the new department name, as you may recall from last year's budget cycle.
I did look around for a second.
The department was formerly known as the Zoning Board of Appeals, or ZBA, and last year it was rebranded to hopefully better reflect the range of responsibilities that are filled by department staff. So those responsibilities broadly fall into 4 categories. I'm just going to touch on some of the trends or initiatives that we've been working on and expect to continue working on up through the next fiscal year that fall into each of those categories. And Tom, you feel free to flip through however you feel appropriate.
Yep.
So in terms of the first or primary responsibility, which are land use regulations, administered by the Zoning Board of Appeals with support from the department. The first notable trend I would say is the decrease in the number of variance applications the board has received, in particular this most recent year. I believe the decrease is attributable to the fact that the board has granted fewer exceptions from our otherwise effective regulations, both in terms of dimensional requirements and use regulations. And then the second notable trend is a decrease in both the number and the complexity of comprehensive permit applications, or 40Bs, that are reviewed by the zoning board. The board has really, in the last year or two, only reviewed insubstantial or minor changes to previously approved 40B developments. The one exception, and the only new application that the board has received, was in fact filed this afternoon. It's an application from Habitat for Humanity, and it consists of just 2 single-family homes. And that's the only one we've received since 2017, when the town achieved its statutory minima, or 10% affordable units or eligible units on our subsidized housing inventory. That 2-unit development, we could contrast that to the type of applications that the board was reviewing in 2016, 2017, which consisted of, anywhere from a few dozen to a few hundred units. So they're also less complex. I think it demonstrates that the town's regulations are just being more equitably and consistently administered. It related to 40Bs in part, or affordable housing production more generally. The department also provides ancillary or supportive staff to the Affordable Housing Trust, and recently assumed some of the treasurer's accounting and financial reporting responsibilities. The department also manages other broader-based housing initiatives. As an example, staff submitted a successful application last spring for the town to be designated as a housing choice community. This enabled us to have exclusive access to housing choice capital grants. We followed up by filing one to support a potential project or renovation project for a property owned by the Affordable Housing Trust, and hope to hear in the next month or so that that application was also successful. Other recent and ongoing initiatives specific to economic development primarily relate to expedited permitting, so you can see that all these functions are kind of interrelated. First, the ZBA reestablished the practice of delegating certain of its responsibilities, particularly minor variance applications, special permits, and signage applications, to the zoning administrator. And the benefit for property owners is that those applications are heard more quickly. A decision has to be rendered within 35 days of filing, compared to 100 days for a variance application heard, for instance, by the zoning board. And also that if an appeal were to be made by an aggrieved party, not that that's happened yet, it would be heard locally instead of having to go off to court. I would note that this is a practice that the board had instituted back in the 80s, and it just kind of fell out of practice, but we noted recently that the Massachusetts Association of Regional Planning Agencies have produced a guidebook on best practices for streamlined local permitting, and specifically called out Hingham for having a zoning administrator that was able to hear certain responsibilities delegated by the zoning board. So that's part of the reason that it's been reinstituted. The department also prepared a warrant article last year to update parcel references for the South Shore Park Priority Development Site, which was established under Chapter 43D, or the expedited permitting law. This just results really in a more coordinated permitting process for property owners, and again, greater access for the town to financial incentives offered by the state. Town meeting approved the warrant article, but there remains another process that we have to go through at the state level with the Interagency Permitting Board, and hope to initiate that in the near term. And then finally, in terms of planning, the department coordinates certain planning activities. These tend to be more topic-specific as opposed to, say, the comprehensive master planning process that's being managed by the Community Planning Department. Recent projects include the housing plan. The Housing Trust sponsored a second community forum just last week, and hopes to complete a draft plan around the first of the year, so that the public will have another opportunity to provide comment. And then other planning projects that are newer to the department, but have been quite interesting over the past year, and we hope to continue to coordinate, are related to climate change. So this board sponsored a public listening session that the Land Use and Development Department and the Conservation Department worked on, and led to the town's designation as an MVP, or a Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness community. And we hope to pursue related grant applications to improve our resilience to climate change in the near future. And I would offer again that department staff participated again along with the Conservation Department in a more regional climate change study through the Regional Planning Agency, MAPC, and Cornell University. The results of that project are expected to be released this upcoming spring, and we hope will help us work with our nearby communities to pursue some projects. All of that is offered for a combined budget.
One low price.
$152,361. You know, this is a minor decrease from last fiscal year. Expenses in particular are rather modest, just at a little over $7,000. So, again, a lean and mean.
Sometimes mean. In a nice way.
Yeah.
Joe.
I guess I got off the zoning board too soon, because now it's an easy job, Bill.
Well, you made it easy, I think.
It's tremendous what this department and what you in particular have accomplished and are accomplishing. It's just incredible. So thank you for that. I think the budget is lean and mean. And there's a lot of responsibility that's being placed on you and the department, and if there are things that come up that you think you're not getting the support, you should let us know, and we'll address it.
Thank you. Always feel supported and happy to provide support.
Thank you. All set?
Does it?
I think last year when you put up that chart, which I really like, it really does help kind of dimensionalize what you do. I think last year we talked about last year and in the last couple of years, you've been on the upper end of that chart. And that a lot of the forward thinking, the long range planning has been difficult to do because of the volume of what's going on in the top and how important that is. I think our hope was that this year you would be spending more time around economic development and long-range planning, and it sounds from your presentation like that's happening. And I think that's terrific. I think all of us find it's hard sometimes to think long-term and to do that important work because the day-to-day gets often can overtake us. I'm glad to see that that's happening for you.
Well, and it sort of coincides with the planning efforts, both the housing production planning effort as well as the master planning effort, across town. So, your ability to lend your very significant expertise to those efforts on behalf of the town, I think, is critical. And, I like the title of the slide, frankly, Service and Partners, because, I think you're always popping up. It's always like, well, let's ask Emily. And, I think you cover such a range with really such grace and also just expertise. I think you are a great partner for the Board of Selectmen, and I think a great resource for the town. I think as you look at this, right, we are the town we are because of some of the rules that we've put in place about how we use our land. And and my colleague to the left, has been in a position of having to enforce those rules, and that's not always an easy conversation, but I think we've tried to be thoughtful about what those rules are. We continually review those, and I think on top of everything else, you staff a very critical board, to those decisions on behalf of the town. So appreciate it.
So when you said to your left, you weren't speaking politically.
No. Well, and I'm actually surprised because I'm very directionally challenged, so.
You miss it?
One of the other things I want to note is that in addition to what's there, your interface and communication and dealing with other departments, with the building department, with the conservation groups, is really critical. And I don't know if it's really reflected there, but it is much appreciated.
Yeah, customer service is something that's really important to us, both for the external clients, but the internal ones too.
Thanks.
Questions for Emily from the public? Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily, good job. Susan.
Conservation.
No, Lonnie's next, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Lonnie.
Page 76.
I can adjust on the fly.
Good evening,
I
Lonnie.
can't speak to Susan's budget, but just on the fly.
If you could take us through your budget?
Sure. So with a fairly modest budget and no significant changes in the department's mission, forecasted revenue, land holdings, or salaries, I thought I would take a little bit of time to highlight some successful projects from the past year and some upcoming initiatives.
Great.
It's unfortunate that Mr. Chambers stepped out because I think he would be interested in a few of these.
I know. I had to bite my tongue.
Exactly.
So first and foremost is the ongoing partnership with the Girl and Boy Scout troops in Hingham. We had 3 Eagle Scout projects completed on Conservation Commission land this year. Some brand new benches at Moore Brewer Park, a boardwalk over at Foundry Pond, and revitalized steps and entrance at Burns Memorial Park, which is across the street here. The main entrance is on Percy Street, which led to sort of an official grand reopening of the park. Me and the assistant conservation officer partnered with the Land Trust to hold their annual fall walk at Burns Memorial Park this year. Included in that is the reopening of the trails. So we did some trail clearing. We blazed the trails so you can now walk in there and follow little blue paint marks to and from the property. It was a public event held on a Saturday and involved multiple partners. There are highlights on HCAM if anybody wasn't able to make it and is interested in knowing what went on. But in essence, it was a celebration of the 175th anniversary of the abolitionist picnic at Tranquility Grove. The land was purchased by the commission many years ago, and the family that donated it, or that sold it to us, was the Burns family, so that's the name change explanation there. So Burns Memorial Park is actually in really great shape. It's doing better than it has been in many years, and the amount of effort that went into restoring it, I have pledged to make sure that it stays that way. We're not going to let it overgrow again. So moving into initiatives for the upcoming year, again, partnering with the Land Trust, I have found that with limited budget and limited time, partnerships make a great deal of difference in our office, and the Land Trust is really amazing. They're very efficient and welcoming, and
they have a lot of time to help, which is great. So partnering with them for the upcoming year, we're hoping to build on their annual meeting that they have. The last theme was the threat to pollinators with climate change, decline in native plantings, and just sort of establish a demonstration garden on town property somewhere that the public can stop by and enjoy. And pollinators, the decline of honeybees is sort of all throughout the media right now. It's getting a lot of attention. So we're hopeful that we can put on an example, a beautiful example garden, so that people will know maybe what they can do on their own properties in town. And then the second piece that I think it will pique everyone's interest is late last fall, an inquiry came in through, I think, the Board of Selectmen office about town forest and the condition of it. From there, Tom contacted me and said, is there anything that we can do? And my personal opinion was that we really needed a professional opinion or assessment of the forest and recommendations for how to proceed. I've only been here 4 years or so now, and so I know that DPW stops by and maintains as much as they can when they can, but they have a lot of property to maintain across town, so it's sort of when available. And my fear is that the health of the forest has declined at a faster rate than what they've been able to tend to it. So Tom connected DPW and I, and we agreed that I would be the leader to move forward and try to get an official assessment of the property done. That is through the state's forest stewardship program. A licensed forester will be assessing the property for us and making recommendations. The deliverable is a 10-year plan, which will highlight the goals of the town, what do we want to see happen, and also recognize that there's a recreational aspect there, so making it still continually open to the public and safe and enjoyable. In order to move forward with that process, there is, they call it a cost-sharing program. Some funds need to be available to get the process started, but then there's a partial reimbursement that we'll be eligible for in the end. So I've included that in my budget request for FY21. It's just that little bit of slush fund to get us started, and we'll see a little bit of that come back at the end of the plan.
Great.
So I'm excited to work on that. I think it'll be good, and I think a lot of people will be really excited to hear it as well. I know Mary had her master plan meeting board set up on the first and second floor recently, and people are, what are your favorite thing or your least favorite thing, or what do you want to see improved in the town? And on 2 different boards, I saw a mention of town forest. So I think it's on everyone's radar, and I'm happy to try to get it through the next step.
Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Questions, Joe?
So the $5,000 consultant services, that's what you're referring to?
Yes, yep.
Okay. What I've seen through the visioning session that I went to for the master plan is that there are going to be more and more demands on your services, and the town residents really place a priority on making sure that there's good stewardship, and you are one of our chief stewards. So thank you, and I have no questions on the budget. I think this is fine.
Great. Mary? Lonnie, when the forest stewardship plan for the forest, when that comes out, would implementing some of those recommendations be something that could down the road, if the dollars were significant, be eligible for CPC?
Possibly. The state program also has grants available for implementing stewardship plans, so I think there's multiple funding sources.
I'd ask you, as this moves along, to keep CPC on your radar screen, because, and then CPC likes to be the funding source of last resort, and when we can say, hey, there's a grant here, or there's some partial sharing, they like that. I just would, it strikes me that some of the implementation of that could become somewhat costly, and if it's eligible for CPC, I'd ask you, next year in like the August, September timeframe when those applications are due, to consider that. And I would just say, thank you for the work that you do with the Scouts. I think it's a win-win for everybody. And I would also say that in the past, it's been difficult sometimes for Boy and Girl Scouts to find Eagle Scout and Gold projects that aren't so complex that they get into the whole committee boards and permitting process. And you've been very helpful in identifying options that provide benefit to the town and that are of a scale that a 17 or 18-year-old young man or young woman can achieve within a year. So thank you.
You know, I, like Joe, in the master plan visioning session that I was at, open space and recreational space and land conservation featured prominently in a number of those discussions. So I think that the town has placed, you know, the town's placed great emphasis on our care of our open space in the past, and I think, you know, if the visioning sessions are any indication, will again for the future. And you know, you serve as a resource to a number of boards, committees, and commissions, just like Emily. You know, I think we're so fortunate to have your expertise and your willingness to share that expertise and your willingness to embrace some of these projects that come along that may not necessarily have an exact home. And, you know, I do think your work with respect to Tranquility Grove and the town forest are examples of your willingness to step up, and we appreciate that.
One thing I'd just like to add to the conversation, it's not going to come up in tonight's conversation because it's not affecting the conservation budget specifically, but you'll notice her title is, Lonnie's title is the Conservation Officer / GIS Administrator. Lonnie has done her best, which is significant for sure, to provide the town with the GIS services that it needs. But as you just heard, there are significant conservation efforts that are required. So part of what one of the positions that I am requesting this year, and you'll hear it when the IT department comes in, is for a new full-time GIS administrator. And part of, and I'll get into why I think that matters when Steve Becker is here, but part of the benefit of that approach is that it gets us a full-time conservation agent or conservation officer as well. So I just, and Lonnie is so good. She's always everywhere you need her to be, doing wonderful things. But I think that to be fair to both needs, a full-time position for both is certainly warranted. So I just wanted to throw that into the conversation.
Great. Questions for the public for Lonnie? Okay, thanks, Lonnie.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Last and certainly not least, Susan Sarney from the Board of Health.
Susan's budget is on page 204.
Okay.
Susan Sarney, Executive Health Officer. I'll just go through the mission and services real quick. We enforce about 16 regulations. Those range from food establishments to beach water testing, communicable disease surveillance, septic systems, building permits, housing complaints, foodborne illnesses, camps, nuisance complaints, and then recently we added the plastic bag enforcement.
I'm taking those. Magic.
And I'll talk to you.
Good. We can just clear the rest of it.
Here's a couple of the permits that we issue in 2018. As you can see, the end is the building permits. That's mostly done by my health agent. Those have increased, but through Permit Eyes, it makes it manageable. Our key initiatives, our social worker increased to 20 hours in November. That was done within the budget. She continues to support the health department, the library, and veterans, but in addition to police and fire. And she serves the town, but she is working under the health department. This was all done within the budget of the health department by changing a few things around. We did receive a grant a couple years ago to do some work on the hoarding disorder, and through that BU recognized this and has given us a social worker for 8 hours. We were also published in a medical journal that recognized all the work that we did, which is great. Here's a couple of pictures of the new leaching field at Derby Street Shops. This should be completed, we're hoping, in 2020.
Where is it?
It's out back of where Rite Aid was.
Okay.
Kind of next to Best Chevrolet and...
Thank you.
Yes. So that should be, we anticipate fully functioning in 2020 under the existing flow, and then we'll look at what they're anticipating for the expansion.
Expansion.
And then lastly, we have been working diligently on our supplementary rules and regulations, which is our septic system regs. We are going to hold a public hearing in January. Our salaries consist of $335,000. We have 3 full-time personnel, 3 part-time personnel, and then our expenses are about a little under $20,000.
Questions, Joe?
No, this is a very complete budget. I've seen this department in various stages at work. You've got a tremendous board, and you really do a tremendous service to the town. I stumbled upon the social worker and found her office. I didn't even know that was an item in our budget, and I'm glad because there's a need in the town, so thank you for providing that as well. I've got no questions on the budget.
Okay.
I'm just curious, without getting into a lot of details, are the septic supplemental rules and regs, is that going to be a big change for the community, medium change, low change?
We have about 5 changes on there.
Okay.
They mostly reflect the changes that are going on in the community with the ADUs.
Okay.
Form As, and the growth that we have seen with the size of the dwellings and the impact on the nitrogen levels in our soils that would affect our groundwater.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is important because, again, what we heard in the master plan visioning sessions is these auxiliary, the dwelling units, the ADUs coming in, is really something that residents are asking for. And so it's an aspect that we need to plan for. So thank you for addressing that.
I would just add, Susan, as we look down, the permits and the inspections, part of your responsibility on behalf of the town is that sometimes you have to be the deliverer of bad news. And I can think of some instances in the last year where that's had to happen, and I appreciate the professional and courteous and respectful way that you have done that. And I know it's not easy, and you have represented the town really well. You've done your job, and you've done it in a positive way, and so thank you.
I had a couple questions. Immunization clinic and clinics and services, can you take me through that change for FY21?
Sure. So for the budget for FY20, it was $5,000. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah.
And then we decreased it down to $1,700.
Yeah.
This year, we purchased 100 doses of the flu vaccine.
Okay.
Last year, we purchased 280 doses. 280 doses is only 1% of the community that was receiving the flu shot. This year, we tried out the 100. We're giving 30 to the homebound and 70 to the employees. We're going to do the same thing this year. So that's the decrease that you're seeing, about $3,300. And then we, because of the increase in personnel with gas and things like that and education, we're putting it back in there.
Okay, so I just, I saw that we were decreasing the number of flu vaccines that we were ordering, and I just was wondering.
The Board of Health decided they don't want to be in clinical care.
Okay.
With only 1% of the population getting the flu, we feel, or the board feels like they can go to CVS, Stop and Shop, Rite Aid, primary care. If there was ever an adverse reaction to the flu shots, they should be with their primary care instead of the town.
Got it, okay.
But that's already, I'm sorry, if that's already happened, isn't that program now finished?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so did you actually dispense all of the flu shots that were?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you're changing your
We
focus
bought,
for next year.
Last year we did 280, this year we did the 100, we're gonna do another 100.
It's the
Yeah.
same.
Okay. And the social worker, so you've increased the social worker to 20, plus you're gonna get a grad student for 8.
Mhm.
Do you think that's enough?
No, but let's see where we go with this.
Well, we are, as you can tell, you saw this, the social worker last year started even lower. We're incrementally increasing those hours. She is doing a great job. She's straight out. There's a constituency here that needs that assistance. So what we're trying to do is grow the budget for that position accordingly so that it fills the need without jumping straight to a full-time position.
Okay.
Yeah, let's figure out if it's working, and then we'll show the need. She does work for all the other departments within the town hall.
Right.
So it's not just health.
Right.
I think there's a benefit across all the departments,
Yeah, no,
which is wonderful. Thank you guys for supporting that.
Yeah.
No, and I absolutely agree with that, and I think we certainly understand that it's not, it hits your budget as a salary line item, but the benefit extends across the town.
That's great. Thank you.
Questions from the public on the Department of Health budget? Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here. Yep.
Just so you know.
Yep. Water transition update?
What page is your budget? Oh.
Dick and David, do you want to come up to the table as well? We got 3 seats. No?
Or you can stay in there, it's fine, whatever you guys want to do.
It's safer to stay.
You can heckle from back there.
But since we do have a quorum, I do need to call our meeting to order, if you don't mind.
Maybe introduce your members, if you will.
I will. My name is Jim Taylor. I'm Chair of the Water Transition and Evaluation Committee, and I'm joined by 2 of the 5 members of the committee. I have Dick Norman here and David Von Lasecki. Lesica. Sorry,
So close.
So close. Just as a reminder, what the Water Transition Evaluation Committee was effectively formed through town meeting's approval of the purchase of the water company. There we go. Again, it's comprised of 5 members, 5 volunteers appointed by Board of Selectmen and the moderator. And our charge is really to support the efforts of you during this transition. It's to support the efforts of the water commissioners and the Board of Selectmen and all the various details, of which there are many, in the transition of the purchase of the water company. What we've really been focusing on over the last 5 or 6 meetings that we've had are a few effective things that are really important to move the process forward. One of those is the review of the DEP business plan. So the DEP, before they turn over the license to the town to supply water, the town is obligated to provide a very detailed business plan to the DEP, which is reviewed and ultimately approved by them, and then the license transfers over. The town hired environmental partners as a consulting firm to assist in this process, and they've been extremely helpful. But our role has been to effectively review draft versions of the business plan, provide input back to environmental partners, and effectively help them move that process forward. So that's a critical component we spent some time on. That's on hold a little bit because the information necessary to complete that business plan, much of which will be completed based on who the third-party operator is. A lot of that information is actually who's running the plan on a day-to-day basis, and some of the financial information is outstanding. So we haven't focused on that in the last month or so. The other key item that we've been spending a lot of time on as a committee is the rules and regulations. So think about it as really as a contract between the ratepayer and the water system operator and the water system. I liken it to kind of your credit card. You know that big thing you get in your credit cards, which are the rules that govern it? No one reads it unless you really need to read it. And so there's a lot of details associated with that. So Aquarian had rules and regulations that were published, and I'm not sure if anyone ever read them, but they were there in existence. So what EPG and our committee has done is effectively taken the Aquarian contract that was in existence. EPG's done a great job of going through that contract, the rules and regulations, and trying to simplify it for us. So let me just give you a few examples of some of the things covered within the rules and regs. It's such things like how does one apply for a new service? How do you connect to the system? What will it cost? What will a ratepayer pay? How are the plumbing connections approved? Since we're dealing with 3 different municipalities, each of whom have their own plumbing inspector, we need to indicate that in the rules and regulations. What's the customer's liability? Where does it begin and end? What's the water system responsible for? What happens if somebody stops paying their bills? Who actually, what leaning authority will the town have to provide some sort of a lien against a property should there be an unpaid bill or multiple unpaid bills? What's the rate setting process? What's the abatement process? What happens if someone's found stealing water? How about water conservation restrictions? Fines associated with that. If somebody violates those restrictions, how much are we going to fine these folks? Water balance and water bank programs, that's effectively looking to offset the use of water by developers. So all these things we've gone into detail on great detail, and I would say that the rules and regulations are probably around 95% done. We've gone through 3 iterations of them. We made a lot of progress on them. And they really are the governing document that's going to be used as a contract between the ratepayer and the water system. But it's going to be a living document. I think we're going to learn a lot as the process goes forward, what works, what doesn't work. I think that that there's been good progress in simplifying it, make it very understandable and readable for the ratepayer, all in one place. If folks have questions about their water, where can they go? There's a few open-ended questions that I think is going to be brought to your attention in the near future, some decisions that will need to be made around policy-related issues. But for the most part, I think we've made a fair amount of progress on this, so expect to see that soon. We've had, again, each of our meetings is publicized in Hingham, Hull, and Cohasset. We've recorded each one of our meetings through HCAM, so that's up and available should folks be interested in viewing that. The draft documents are on our Town of Hingham Committee website, so if folks wanted to see kind of the progress that's been made on the rules and regulations, it's there for them. And so it's been a very open process. Now, before final approval of those rules and regulations, there will be a formal public hearing, which you will hold and publicize and provide customers and the public one more time to comment on them before ultimately the water commissioners will have the ability to accept and approve the rules and regulations that govern it. So anyway, we've been spending a fair amount of time on that as a committee. It's covered there's a lot more details in these things than I had anticipated and expected. Another item that our committee is handling is that members of our committee are serving on some of the selection groups, helping Tom with the selection of the water superintendent. We have a committee person who's going to be on Tom's team in terms of helping evaluate that position. And then we have 2 members of our committee that are serving as representation on the third-party operator RFP that's in process, and hopefully we'll be receiving bids fairly soon on that. So those are really kind of the major items that the committee has been handling. We've received, while our meetings haven't been full of participants, we've had some excellent folks that have helped us. I'd like to shout out Kirk Schultz has provided a lot of information and help in terms of the rules and regulations from his perspective on the 4 or 5 or 10 different hats he wears in town for the Board of Health and the Water Supply Committee, and also thank you, Kirk, for all your help on that. The Advisory Committee has a couple members that have participated in those, and we actually have had the Cohasset Water Commission Chair showed up at one of our meetings as well and provided some input from their perspective, which was very, very helpful. And I'm sure that we're probably the most watched YouTube shows on HCAM. I'm not sure if that's true, but I believe it is. So there's one item though that we really are going to kind of pass the buck to you, but we've started this process. Well, let me take a step backwards. So another area of our obligation will be around communication. When you think about all the things that need to be done to communicate to the ratepayers, so much of what has been done thus far has been private, not private, but really more internal issues around some of the legal aspects in terms of turning over and purchasing the system. I like to think now we're really headed into the public phase. of this and really starting to get out there and educating the public as to where we stand. Mary, Tom, and I presented to the Hull Board of Selectmen a couple of weeks ago, giving them an update on where we stood. Mary and I have spoken to some members of the press to let them know kind of where we stand, to start getting information out there so the public understands that the process is moving forward and moving smoothly. And we hope to have a lot more communication efforts in place for the new year in terms of starting the transition of the communication to the ratepayer. They'll need to know on day one who to call if they have a problem, how to read their bills, all those things. So those are other items we're working on. Then the last thing we've done, which has been somewhat a fun job to do, has been around naming. So, thank you. Been around naming. So when you think about the name, Aquarian's name is going to come off of everything on the day of the closing. So think about all their signs around town. You drive into town, you see a sign. You look at their trucks, you see a sign. You get your bill, you see a sign. So our job will be to determine, well, really your job will be to determine what the new name will be for the water company. So what we've done is we went out there and done some public outreach. For a 3-week period, we collected suggestions from the public, what they felt were potential names for the water system. We publicized it in the 3 towns. We asked for suggestions. There was an online form on our website. We also put boxes, ballot boxes in Hull, Hingham, and Cohasset town halls should folks be uncomfortable using the online process. So we received over 100 submissions on various names and suggestions that folks heard. So drum roll, please. I'm going to list, and Tom, if you don't mind.
Of course, I'm sorry.
Working your magic, I would appreciate it. So in no particular order other than alphabetical order, is a number of names that have been presented and suggested, some with more frequency than others. So let me just run through some of these. So Accord Water, of course, is because some of our water comes from Accord Pond. Bear Cove Water, Harbor Water, Hingham H2O Company. There was a surprisingly large number of submissions for that. I'm not sure if that would actually work from a naming perspective, but I thought that was interesting. Of course, Hingham Water Company. Somebody in this room suggested Hingham Regional Water System, but I won't out Kirk on that one. Hullum Water. So we also saw an effort for folks to try to incorporate different towns in it. Nantasket Water, Old Colony, Seaside Water, Tri-Town Water, Trident Water, when you think about 3 prongs of a trident. And there was clearly a coordinated effort around Ware River Water Company. We were barraged with about 30 responses within about half an hour. Each of which had the same exact description as to why they were recommending. So kudos to them. There was a couple that I didn't list on here that I thought were interesting as well. My favorite was Watery McWaterface. We had 4 submissions clearly from high school students, and so nice job. And then lastly, and this is something I think would violate our naming rules in town, Tom Brady Water System. Also recommended as well. So every time the email came in with a new naming suggestion, I was eagerly opening that email because it was a lot of unintended humor that I received. So along with the suggestions, we asked for folks to identify themselves and why they recommended the name. I have for you the list of all the submissions with the names in alphabetical order, or no, I'm sorry, in the order that they were received. So for your own perusal, we didn't want to influence any of the suggestions. So, I don't want to put a lot of pressure on you, but we need to pick a name at some point fairly soon because we need to do branding around it. We need to even, create bills when you think about the bills. When you think about the uniforms when you think about the cars, the trucks, the signs. So I'm not exactly sure the process you'll follow to pick the name, but good luck on that one. But it's exciting. And clearly, you know, the name will last forever, so don't feel like you have a lot of pressure on you or not, but, so, you know, we've received a lot of feedback that, you know, some folks felt very strongly that they wanted to continue having Hingham recognized in the name, and then an equally passionate group felt that Hingham shouldn't be in the name, that it should be more recognizing the fact that there's multiple towns that are part of the system.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Jim.
So from our perspective, I think that's it. We're, you know, again, we're continuing to, we're probably going to run through the rules and regs one more time before they come to you and the public, and we'll continue working on behalf of the transition. Oh, one more point. So this is a committee that will never die, by the way, because once we're done with the transition, we turn into the evaluation committee. And our charge at that point will be we'll have a couple of different obligations. One will be is that we'll most likely participate in a cost of service study to help identify how much is it costing the system to run, and that will help inform you for rates, when you're setting rates. We'll most likely be involved with a capital engineering study at some point to really try to help you with prioritizing capital needs and projects. And then lastly, after some time passes, we'll be looking at governance. Does a current governance system make sense? That was something that was asked for during the approval process, and something I think will need to be done on a regular basis. So that will probably take place a year after we've taken ownership.
Great, thank you. Joe, questions for Jim?
Yeah, in the rules and regs review, have you found a town that has their rules and regs that you think is a good model for Hingham to follow?
Well, EPG did a lot of legwork on that and trying to find best practices from the various communities that they've worked with. For our perspective, I think we're comfortable with the rules and regs thus far. There's a couple open questions though, one of which is around fining for folks that violate the restrictions. I mean, how we believe in the first pass we read, the fines were probably too low. It wouldn't inhibit folks from violating those rules. So we're going to do some more research in terms of looking at some other communities and what they're doing from a fine perspective. But other than that, we think that we've been able to pull in best practices from a lot of different places. Now, again, proof will be in the pudding. I suspect that we'll be back and re-looking at those rules and regs every year, and trying to update them and make them better as we understand the process a little better.
So you'll forgive me for playing lawyer, but
yeah,
is there a town or a group of towns that you can identify that this is a good model that you've identified?
We've certainly looked at a number of them. I know that John Coughlin's been involved in reviewing the rules and regs from a legal perspective before we saw them. So we know from a legal perspective they've been vetted. I don't know if anyone has every community is different. I mean, one of the differences is we'll have a third-party operator. So that has to be recognized and referred to, and whereas most communities actually are running their own water system. So again, we've tried to pull from the really, the best, what we believe to be the communities that have the best rules and regs in place. But there's no gold standard that's been identified as like that town has it.
Really's got it right, or
right. Because, and again, you need to really massage some of the rules and regs based on the population and the customer base. Some communities are more commercial oriented, where others are more residential. So, we've tried to do the best we can in pulling all those together.
Thank you.
Mary. No, I'm good.
Great. Jim, Dick, David, thank you. I have been one of the maybe few, maybe many viewers watching your meetings. I think that was one of the other aspects of this acquisition that we said we would do. And when we talked to all of you as part of the talent bank, we talked about you being the public face or part of the public face of this transition. You've been working really hard. I think it's very detail-oriented, as Jim's pointed out, not all the fun and games of the naming. But I think it's essential that the public continue to be able to see those deliberations, and I appreciate you undertaking those in public, and I appreciate you undertaking them on television. I think, you know, as we all know, that's not always easy, but nonetheless, I think a critical point, a critical part of our continued transition and acquisition of the water company. So I appreciate your efforts, and I appreciate your report tonight. You know, for those folks who don't routinely tune into your meetings, you know, periodically we get questions about where are we with all of this, and so I do think it's helpful, you know, for us to reiterate, I think, the work that we're all doing on behalf of the town. So I don't know if Dick or David have anything else you'd like to particularly offer tonight.
I think it's been a valuable effort, and I think we all appreciate that our mission is to build a better water company, and I think that's driving our behavior.
Great. Questions from the,
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in very briefly. So one of the things Jim mentioned when he first sat down was that the T&E committee has been helping with, is going to assign folks to help me with evaluating the water superintendent, as well as the bids as they come in. The proposals for a prospective vendor are due now next Thursday. It's no longer a date, it's a, there's a day pending.
In the
very, that's
Yeah.
right, now a day of the week. So that's coming up, and we'll start that evaluation in the near term. And then also the water superintendent position has been posted earlier this week. That is up online, and hopefully we've sent it to the right groups, and we'll get some good quality applicants and end up with a good superintendent to help guide this process.
You have a question?
No, I thought you were going to confess that you shot in the 30 requests for a name.
Could I just add, since this is a water transition update, I just mention a couple things. Jim mentioned that we were in Hull, and one of the things, Karen, we knew that was important to you was to potentially increase the size of the customer advisory board. So we have let the town of Hull know that we will be putting forward a warrant article for town meetings consideration to increase the size of the CAB to 6. And Hull actually, we also asked Hull if they would be willing to have a representative on the RFP, on the system operator selection committee. And they actually selected Joe Struzzieri, who is 30 years, Tom?
Yeah, that's what he said.
Joe, 30 years in Public Works in Hull. So this is a guy who really kind of knows a lot of the system and will be really helpful. We've also, Capital Markets has put out an RFP for an underwriter for the financing. So that's going to start in earnest at the beginning of the year. And we're also having some conversations with Aquarian relative to the GIS system and the SCADA software that runs it. So, you know, it's mostly on the lines of, hey, until we select a third-party operator, is there anything we should be doing right now? For example, if the town needs a server on which to host the SCADA system, is there a lead time on that? So, you know, what are the specs on that? So we're doing a lot of those things as well that are outside of the purview of the T&E committee, but also part of the transition. I'd make one other request, and that is that, you know, Jim said that the rules and regs are going to be coming to us, and I think our protocol has been that after John Coughlin takes a look at a draft, when it goes to the T&E committee, Karen, you and Joe both get it. You get a copy of it. So the latest version you probably got was last Friday when we got a version. I think this is probably at a pretty good time where if you have an opportunity to read through there, if there's anything that you notice that, you know, that you have a concern about, I think this would be a good time to maybe raise those to Tom, who can communicate them to Jim. I think that way, as the rules and regs get finalized, we can just kind of keep things moving.
We met last night and reviewed that draft, and we had fairly minor edits on it, some of which was just wordsmithing more than anything else. So I think that that would be appropriate for you to review the most recent. It will capture almost everything that's there.
Further questions from the public on the water transition update? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Okay, naming bylaw discussion. Thank you for pulling together our thoughts and aggregating them, Michelle, I think mostly, into a kind of a coherent document. So I think I've said my piece. I've done a lot of talking about this, so I leave it to the two of you to consider the charge and the ask, and if anybody has any further comments. I think what the town administrator's office tried to do was take the input from Joe and Mary and me and put it together in a document that would create the charge for the committee. It would be a 5-person committee to review Article 40, which is our current naming bylaw. A few of the things that we'd like them to do, without limiting them, would be to consider whether and when to name public buildings or lands for living people or families, whether and when to name public buildings or lands for a commercial enterprise, whether and when to name public buildings or lands for civic organizations, naming rights in public-private partnerships, reputational risk clauses, funding levels associated with naming, approval processes to name public buildings or lands, name removal processes for public buildings or lands, and a duration of naming and the implication of that duration. We've asked that they undertake some outreach, not unlike the kind of outreach that Mary talked about with respect to the original naming bylaw, that they should take a look at what other communities are doing, as well as making sure that they cast a wide net in terms of talking with both town and civic committees, boards, and employees. I think another important component here for this potential amendment to the bylaw would be to work with John Coughlin to make sure that it sort of flows appropriately.
Exactly.
So I think he would play an important role. So that's what the charge essentially encompasses. I don't know if my colleagues have any comments.
I've reviewed the charge. I think it addresses the issues that need to be addressed. I would just add that the charge includes at the end that the committee that to be appointed would report its recommendation to this board by November 1st of 2020. I think that's an important deadline so that we're all in a position to act. So I support moving forward with the charge to the naming bylaw committee.
Okay. Do we have to vote the charge separately?
Yeah, I would do it. So,
Lost my vote
is
list.
that on the, it's not on the vote list, I apologize. I think it's a good idea though, Karen.
Yep. So I'd accept, Mary, do you have any comments?
No, I provided feedback, and I think the collective feedback from all of us, this is a specific and comprehensive charge.
So I'd accept a motion to accept the naming bylaw committee charge as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And so now the question is, who would we like to appoint to the naming bylaw committee?
So we are looking to appoint 5 members.
That's correct. So I'd like to appoint Wendy Ellison to the naming bylaw committee.
Second.
Any further discussion on Wendy?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Before I make a recommendation, I would just say that similar to what our experience has been on a lot of committees, we've gotten more people who have applied than we have available positions, and we're just so grateful to everybody who's applied for this. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Sarah Amelia to the naming bylaw committee.
Second. Any further discussion on Sarah? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I make a motion to appoint Phil Edmondson to the committee, and I don't know at what point we would want to designate a chair. But as part of this, I would, part of that motion, that he be designated the chair of the committee.
Is there a second?
Sure, second.
Okay. Any further discussion on Phil? All those in favor?
Aye.
And Phil Edmondson as the chair of the committee?
Yes.
Is the vote? Okay. Aye.
I'll make a motion to appoint Scott Ford to the Naming Bylaw Committee.
Second?
Any further discussion on Scott? All those in favor?
Aye.
And I make a motion to appoint Melissa Tully to the committee.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we can contact them, Michelle, Tom, and make sure they
Will do.
know they're on board, and make sure they have a copy of the charge, and, I think this will be important and sensitive work for the town. I think it's a great group, and I think it represents a number of sort of skill sets and areas of town, so I think that'll be, it'll be an important and effective group. Okay.
Good.
So we've got, on an annual basis, I think, I might have mentioned this last week, on an annual basis, we review and renew a number of the alcoholic beverages and state licenses regarding amusements and livery licenses. We are the local issuing authority, and on these annual licenses need to be voted every year. Makes them an annual license. So, how did we do it last time? Did we
I
just?
think we did a consent. We did a.
Just for all as presented?
I think we had to do each of the
Each category.
category.
Yeah. So,
I think the vote language right here is.
would cover each of
Would
these?
cover it, I think so.
Okay, so maybe before.
Says the non-lawyer.
Yeah, so before we get to that, I suppose, are there any questions with respect to any of the applicants on the list? And Chief, you've reviewed these.
Yes, we went through a two-stage process. The detectives reviewed all the established.
Sorry.
Kind of suggestion was that. The police department actually went through a two-stage process. The detective division went out and visited most of the established. I think there was 4 that they weren't able to get to because of being closed or renovations, and we don't really see any problems with those. We'll check on those as they become available.
Okay.
We also reviewed any call history to those locations, and I think over the past 3 years, most of the calls there were sort of, I would probably say that they were more proactive calls when they had, when they identified someone that may have had too much to drink. Interestingly enough, I did see that quite a few of those calls along the Route 3A corridor were people that came in already in a certain drunken condition, and they were basically handled, so.
Yeah.
I know there was a recent issue that occurred up at the range, and I sort of wrote a little bit more detail on that. I'm very happy with the relationship with the range. They actually took a lot of proactive steps, and I think, we went over it. We talked to all the officers. The incident sort of occurred after the bar was closed. You get, is an inherent problem. We always have this issue every Thanksgiving when the college kids come home or the groups all get together, and when they haven't seen each other in a year, it's tough to get them out of the parking lot. Their night isn't over, and one of the things I didn't really understand, because it's been a long time since I've done a detail, there's a new phenomenon, a new trend now, is that everyone takes Ubers to and from, and the officers are trying to move people along, and they're like, "Oh, I'm waiting for my Uber. I called. They haven't showed up yet." The range actually was proactive and had Ubers on call. So so I think it was an unfortunate, out of all that crowd there, that just 2 got a little out of control. There was some alcohol issues with those two, and they sort of hopefully realized they made a mistake because they ended up being our guests for the night.
Okay.
So hopefully the message has been sent.
It's not really Airbnb down there.
No, it isn't really, no. And I think, my history's, I've never really seen the Range as that type of restaurant or facility.
Yeah, I was going to say,
It sort of shocked us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a number of responsible merchants on this list, but, my experience at the Range, particularly in the summer with that open back area, is a very family-oriented.
Yeah.
Operation and courteous staff and responsible staff, so.
I think it's a bigger open restaurant, and I think it just provided a venue in that town, and I'm not being critical, but the main flow there was not, it was people from Weymouth. I'm not derogatory at all, but it's located on the line. And it's most of the bar facilities in that area are very small. This is bigger.
Yep.
So we talked about next year's plans, and they were very cooperative, and they had nothing but praise for the police, and we actually sort of thought that they did a very well job trying to control it. Now we know where to concentrate.
Great.
Yep.
Great.
Okay.
I know that can be a challenging situation. It looks like your department handled it quite well.
Yeah, I think overall it was a good thing, and I think it's important that you don't ever want to see anyone get arrested, but it also, when next year comes, they'll remember that action will be taken when it's needed.
Yep, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any comments on any of the others?
No, I think everything was good. I'm sort of actually pretty happy with the results and the response we get from the different organizations.
Okay, accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to renew the annual common victular all alcoholic restaurant licenses as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. So next are the club licenses. I'm assuming no issues with
No
these?
issues, no.
Okay. I'd accept the motion.
Got that
You're
one?
doing such a great job.
Okay. I don't know how to say that victular thing, but I'll make a motion to renew the annual common victular all alcoholic club licenses as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Joe, you get to do the next.
It says victualler, okay.
Wine and malt beverage, I know we've had no issues with any of these.
No.
Right, okay.
So I move to renew the common victular wines and malt beverages restaurant licenses as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Joe?
We come to a category which consists only of the Hingham Yacht Club. I move to renew the common victualler wines and malt beverage club license as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Package stores, no issues here?
No issues, no.
Same. So, from time to time, you undertake, kind of a sting operation rate to.
Yeah, we usually try to do one annually, and there's also the state does as well, so we work in coordination with them.
Okay. Entertain a motion here.
I move to renew the retail package store all alcoholic beverages licenses as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All right. Next up, no issues here, I'm assuming? None?
Nope.
Okay.
Make a motion to renew the retail package store wines and malt beverages licenses as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So now we get to Class 1 sellers of automobiles. We've only got 3 of those in town. Is that something, do you?
Generally, I've never been involved in that
Okay.
one. The only thing we do is inspections on the limousines, and that one's in compliance.
Okay, all right.
I move to renew the Class 1 sellers agent licenses as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
How about Class 2, Joe?
So, can someone educate me as to the distinction between a Class 1 and a Class 2 license?
I believe it has to do with the amount of vehicles that are on the lot, and they're basically like a used lot. I think it's actually like a used car lot.
Right, that's what it appears to be for Class 2. So I move to renew the Class 2 licenses as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You want a motion on this next one?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to renew the annual automatic amusement device license as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay.
And finally, the annual livery license. I move to renew the limousine license to Charles Sands, doing business as Charles B. Livery, for 1 year, expiring December 31, 2020.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
You know, one suggestion I just might make that we as a town may want to consider is the process of getting liquor licenses is long. And when we think about the number of, you know, every time a liquor license comes up, there are 3 or 4, you know, there's a lot of demand for it. But as we think about the potential build-out of, for example, the expansion of the Derby Street shops and other parts of town, we should ask ourselves whether 5 years from now, we as a town would want to have more liquor licenses. And if we do, we would want to start that process. I don't know a whole lot about it, other than it takes a very long time.
Right.
So I just, you know, as we're considering some of the development that's going on in town,
That's a good point.
we just may want to ask ourselves so that we can have the conversation.
Yep. Right. Okay, will do.
And it might even start with just kind of understanding what the process and the time horizon is, because I don't know anything about that.
I think the last time it was done was for the Derby shops.
Yes.
I think there was 11 licenses added at the time. It was sort of a special purpose, and then I believe it involves state legislation.
Yeah, it's a
of some
legislative
sort.
process.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it can't be done.
But I think the developer was involved in making sure of that.
Probably, yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, I think we are at that point of the evening. I don't think we have any other votes. Town administrator reports. Michelle?
Nothing, thank you.
Not tonight, thank you.
not tonight.
Joe?
Just one, this is my first time going through the budget process, and it has been incredibly impressive how much Tom and Michelle have made this a smooth process. I just want to personally thank both of you. I know it's not just the two of you, but your work really shines, so thank you.
And I agree with that. You know, I think last year you instituted the slides to sort of give us an overview of what's going on there and new initiatives. And, you know, I think this year that's even better.
Great.
Yeah, helpful.
Yes, the department heads do a great job being prepared with that. They really, they love the idea, quite frankly, of being able to talk to the public and to you about what it is they do every year, every day. And so, thank you for allowing them the opportunity, because they really appreciate it.
All set? Mary?
I just want to congratulate Joe Kenaway and Jared Mayo, Troop 1, 2 new Eagle Scouts. They actually did 2 of the projects that Lonnie mentioned.
Oh, that's great.
With conservation, so that is terrific. And, you know, this past weekend was Christmas in the Square, and so many things went around that. And I know many, many people are involved in putting that together, but I would want to just recognize the efforts of Lynn Barclay, who's the head of the Downtown Association, for her tireless effort and work in really making it a very successful weekend.
I completely agree. I was in the square Friday evening, and it had started to rain a little bit and then stopped, and it was just a fantastic community event with a range of, you know, ages and participants. And in the master planning visioning session that I was at, one of the pluses of Hingham was kind of that small town feel. And boy, if you don't feel that small town feel at Christmas in the Square, you're not going to get it anywhere. And the new fire truck coming with Santa in it, I was like, come on.
I like the police truck better.
Yeah. Fair enough. So I agree. A lot of work goes into that, but the Square really shines that night. And the Heritage Museum was packed with people, and the Festival of Trees, I think that you spoke about, that the Hingham Women's Club puts on, you know, was just beautiful. So a lot of volunteers make that go. DPW, police, fire, were all down there, keeping us safe, keeping the area clean and picked up, and including the, I hadn't seen this before, the cotton balls that go on the MBTA train bed.
On the grating.
That go flying like you're on the Polar Express. I was like, so really, a really wonderful evening. So Lynn and the merchants, and again, police, fire, and DPW, thanks for all you do. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.